The ancient ship drifted in the darkness like a dead giant. Dr. Kethvar pressed his long fingers against the viewing window of his research vessel and stared at the massive hull before them. Even after 3 months of study, the sight still took his breath away. Still no response from the main systems, reported his assistant, a young Zalani female named Sira. Her blue skin showed the pale patches that meant she was tired. They had all been working too hard lately. Kethvar nodded slowly. The ship they had found in the Terminus Nebula was unlike anything in the galactic databases. It was huge, bigger than 10 modern warships put together. Its black metal hull was covered in strange patterns that seemed to shift and move when you looked at them too long. Every scan showed the same impossible truth. This ship was built by the predecessors, the ancient race that had vanished millions of years ago. "The council teams will arrive tomorrow," Sira said quietly. "Maybe they will have better luck than us." Kethvar made a sound that might have been laughter, but it held no joy. "The council's best minds have been trying to understand predecessor technology for 1,000 years. They have never succeeded before." The ship hung in space like a dark promise. Its hull was perfect, not a single scratch or dent despite its incredible age. The metal looked like it had been forged yesterday, but the energy readings told a different story. This ship was old beyond measure, filled with power systems that made no sense to modern science. Over the next few days, the council's greatest experts arrived. First came the synthetics, beings of pure logic who had replaced their biological bodies with perfect machines. Their leader, Unit Prime 7, approached the dead ship with mathematical precision. They tried every code, every frequency, every possible combination of signals. The ship remained silent. Next were the ethereals, creatures of living energy who could manipulate power itself. They reached out with their glowing tendrils, trying to touch the ship's sleeping systems directly. The ancient hull absorbed their energy like a hungry void and gave nothing back. The Voidborn came last. These beings existed partly outside normal space and could see things others could not. They studied the ship for days, their multiple eyes glowing as they peered into dimensions beyond normal sight. Finally, their speaker, a tall figure wrapped in shadows, announced their failure. "The ship exists in all dimensions at once," the Voidborn said in a voice like distant thunder. "Its systems are locked behind barriers we cannot cross." The predecessors built their final creation too well. Dr. Kethvar watched as one by one, the greatest minds in the galaxy admitted defeat. The ship was intact. Its power systems were functional, but it would not respond to anyone. It was as if the ancient vessel was waiting for something, or someone, that no longer existed. "Perhaps it is meant to remain a mystery," Unit Prime 7 concluded after another failed attempt. "We should catalog what we can and move on to more productive research." The other experts agreed. Within a week, most of them had left. The great ship was declared a historical artifact, too dangerous to disturb and too complex to understand. Plans were made to turn the area into a museum, where young beings could come to stare at the impossible creation of their ancestors. That was when the humans arrived. The Tenacious was not an impressive ship. Compared to the sleek vessels of the council races, it looked like it had been built from spare parts and held together with hope. Its hull was patched in a dozen places, and its engines made sounds that worried experienced engineers. But it flew, and more importantly, it carried a crew that refused to give up on things that others called impossible. Captain Sarah Chen was a small woman with dark hair and eyes that seemed to see through problems to solutions on the other side. She had been salvaging dead ships and forgotten technology for 15 years, and she had learned that the universe was full of surprises for those willing to look beyond the obvious. "Request permission to attempt restoration." Chen transmitted to the council station that watched over the ancient ship. The response came back quickly, and Kethvar could hear the amusement in the controller's voice. "Permission granted, Captain Chen, but I should warn you, the galaxy's best minds have declared this ship beyond recovery." Chen's voice crackled back through the static. "Well, it's a good thing we're not the galaxy's best minds, then. We're just humans who fix things." Dr. Kethvar found himself curious despite his exhaustion. Humans were the newest members of the Galactic Council, barely 200 years since first contact. Their technology was primitive by galactic standards, their ships were crude, and their understanding of advanced science was limited. They were tolerated because they were enthusiastic and harmless, but nobody expected them to accomplish anything significant. The human ship approached the ancient Dreadnought slowly. Unlike the previous attempts, which had involved complex scanning arrays and sophisticated probes, the humans simply docked with the dead giant and began to explore it by hand. Kethavar received permission to observe, and he watched through remote cameras as the human crew entered the dark corridors of the predecessor ship. They carried simple tools and basic scanners, nothing that could compare to the equipment the other teams had used. But something was different about their approach. Where the synthetics had analyzed and the ethereals had manipulated and the Voidborn had examined, the humans simply explored. They touched surfaces with their bare hands. They listened to the silent walls. They talked to each other about what they saw and felt, sharing ideas that often made no scientific sense. "This corridor feels sad," one of them said, a young woman with bright red hair. "The walls remember something," agreed another. An older man with clever eyes and scarred hands. Dr. Kethavar found their methods puzzling. Sadness was not a property that could be measured. Walls did not have memories. Yet something about their presence seemed to change the ship around them. Lights that had remained dark for millennia began to flicker. Displays that had ignored the galaxy's most advanced technology showed the first signs of life in ages beyond counting. As the first day ended, Kethavar realized he was witnessing something unprecedented. The humans were not trying to command the ancient ship or force it to obey. Instead, they were treating it like a living thing that had been sleeping for too long. They spoke to it gently, worked with its systems instead of against them, and approached each new discovery with wonder instead of cold analysis. For the first time in 3 months, the great ship was beginning to respond. And Dr. Kethavar found himself wondering if perhaps the galaxy had been wrong about humans. Perhaps being primitive and unadvanced was not always a weakness. Perhaps sometimes it was exactly what the universe needed. Marcus Rodriguez had been fixing broken things his whole life. As chief engineer of the Tenacious, he had learned to listen to machines the way others listened to music. Every engine had its own song, every power system its own rhythm. The ancient ship they had entered sang the strangest song he had ever heard. "The power flows are all wrong," his assistant Jenny Park said, staring at her scanner readings. "According to this, the energy should be distributed evenly throughout the ship. But it's not. It's pooling in some areas and completely absent in others." Marcus pressed his hand against the dark wall beside him. The metal was warm, almost alive under his touch. "Maybe it's not wrong," he said slowly. "Maybe it's just different than what we expect." While the other alien species had tried to understand the ship through logic and advanced science, the humans did something simpler. They walked through its corridors and talked to it. They touched its walls and listened to its silence. Most importantly, they treated the ancient vessel not as a machine to be commanded, but as a friend who had been hurt and needed care. Dr. Elena Vasquez, the team's expert on ancient cultures, spent hours studying the symbols carved into the walls. Unlike the other scientists who had tried to decode them like a mathematical puzzle, she approached them as art, as expressions of feeling and meaning. "Look at this," she called to the others, running her fingers along a series of flowing marks near what might have been a control panel. "These aren't instructions. They're like prayers, or maybe poems." Captain Chen joined her, studying the alien writing with curious eyes. "What do they say?" "I think they're about hope," Elena said softly, "and about waiting for someone who understands." The beings who built this ship, they put their hearts into it as much as their technology. It was Jenny who made the first real breakthrough. She was trying to activate a small console when she got frustrated and simply placed both hands on its surface, closing her eyes and concentrating. "Please," she whispered to the silent machine. "Please work. We're not here to hurt you. We just want to help," the console flickered. Just for a moment, symbols appeared on its dark screen. Not the harsh, angular writing of modern technology, but the flowing, artistic marks that covered the ship's walls. Then it went dark again, but something had changed. "Did you see that?" Jenny breathed. Marcus nodded, excitement building in his chest. "Try it again, but this time don't think about what you want it to do. Think about why you want it to do it." Jenny placed her hands on the console again, but this time she thought about the ancient beings who had built this ship. She thought about how lonely they must have been in their final days, how much hope they must have put into this one creation. She thought about understanding and friendship and the desire to help. The console came to life, not with the cold efficiency of modern technology, but with something warmer, more organic. The symbols flowed across the screen like living water, and somehow, without understanding the language, Jenny knew what they meant. Welcome, friend. Finally. Word spread quickly through the human crew. What worked for Jenny worked for others. The ship responded not to commands or complex technical knowledge, but to genuine emotion and sincere intention. When Marcus approached a dead power coupling with the honest desire to repair it, the ancient systems guided his hands to the right connections. When Elena studied a sealed door with curiosity and respect, it opened to reveal chambers that had been closed for millions of years. The breakthrough they had all been waiting for came on the fourth day. The ship's main computer core was buried deep in its heart, protected by layers of security that had stopped every previous expedition. But when Captain Chen approached it with her small team, she didn't try to break through the barriers. Instead, she sat down in front of the sealed entrance and began to talk. "We know you're in there," she said quietly, speaking to the ancient intelligence that slept within. "We know you've been waiting for a very long time. We're not here to take anything from you or force you to do anything you don't want to do. We just want to understand. We want to help if we can." The sealed door began to glow. Slowly, patterns of light spread across its surface. Not the harsh warnings that had appeared for the other alien teams, but something gentler, more welcoming. The door slid open with a sound like a sigh of relief. The chamber beyond was beautiful in a way that took their breath away. The walls were covered in flowing designs that seemed to move and dance in the soft light. At the center of the room stood a pillar of crystal that pulsed with inner fire, and from it came a voice that spoke directly to their minds. "Finally," it said, and the word carried the weight of millions of years of waiting. Finally, someone who understands. The voice belonged to something that called itself the Custodian, the ship's controlling intelligence, but more than that. It was the preserved consciousness of the ship's builders, their hopes and dreams, and final desperate message to the future. "Why did the others fail?" Captain Chen asked, speaking aloud in the crystal chamber. "They tried to command me," the Custodian replied, its voice sad but patient. "They approached me as conquerors, as beings who believed they had the right to take what they wanted. But I was not built to serve those who would use power for its own sake. I was built to recognize those who would use power to protect and preserve life." Marcus stepped forward, his engineer's mind racing with possibilities. "What do you need from us?" "Understanding," the Custodian said simply. "My builders knew that someday a great darkness would return to this galaxy. They built me to stand against it, but they also knew that I would need partners, not masters. I have been waiting for beings who could see me not as a weapon to be wielded, but as a friend to be trusted." Elena looked around the beautiful chamber, at the art and poetry that covered every surface. "Your builders, they weren't just scientists, were they? They were artists, dreamers, people who believed in beauty and hope." "Yes," the Custodian said, and warmth flooded its voice. "And you understand this because you carry the same spark they did. You have not become so advanced that you have forgotten how to hope, how to dream, how to believe in impossible things." As the days passed, more and more of the ancient ship came alive under human care. The crew of the Tenacious worked alongside the Custodian, learning its systems not through force or manipulation, but through partnership and mutual respect. What had seemed like impossibly advanced technology revealed itself to be surprisingly intuitive once approached with the right mindset. The ship, which Captain Chen had begun calling the Redemption, was more than just a vessel. It was a promise, a gift from the past to the future, waiting for the right beings to claim it. And those beings, it seemed, were not the galaxy's most advanced races, but the simple, hopeful humans who had refused to give up on a dream that everyone else had declared impossible. The Redemption was waking up, and with each passing day it revealed more of its incredible secrets. What the humans had first thought was just an ancient warship turned out to be something far more amazing and terrifying. "Look at this," Dr. Elena Vasquez called from the ship's vast central bay. She stood before a massive display that showed star maps dating back millions of years. "The Custodian has been watching the galaxy for all this time. It's been recording everything." Captain Chen joined her, studying the swirling patterns of light that showed the rise and fall of countless civilizations. "What are we looking at, Elena?" "History," Elena breathed. "The complete history of our galaxy. And look here." She pointed to dark patches that appeared on the map at regular intervals like a disease spreading across the stars. Every 50 million years, something happens. Entire sectors go dark. Whole civilizations just disappear. The custodian's voice filled the chamber, carrying with it the weight of ancient knowledge. My builders called them the Silence. They come from beyond the galaxy, from the empty spaces between worlds. They consume not just life, but the very possibility of life. They are the reason my people built me. Marcus Rodriguez felt a chill run down his spine. As the ship's chief engineer, he had been working closely with the custodian to understand the redemption systems. What he had discovered made him both amazed and afraid. This ship isn't just big, he told the gathered crew. It's impossibly advanced. The power systems alone could supply energy to an entire planet. The weapons. I don't even know how to describe the weapons. They work on principles that our science doesn't have names for yet. Captain Chen looked around at her small crew. Barely 30 people compared to the thousands who could serve on a ship this size. But why us? Why did it respond to humans when the galaxy's most advanced species failed? The custodian's answer came with a sadness that touched their hearts. Because you still remember how to hope when hope seems impossible. The other races have evolved beyond the desperate creativity that once drove them. They have become perfect at what they do, but they have forgotten how to adapt, how to take impossible chances, how to believe in miracles. Jenny Park, the young engineer who had first made contact with the ship's systems, raised her hand hesitantly. But we're not warriors. Most of us are just salvage workers and scientists. How are we supposed to fight something that destroyed civilizations far more advanced than ours? You misunderstand your own nature, the custodian replied gently. Every day you take broken things and make them work again. You look at problems that others call unsolvable and find solutions anyway. You refuse to accept that anything is truly hopeless. This is exactly the kind of thinking that my builders possessed, and it is exactly what the galaxy will need when the Silence returns. As if summoned by their conversation, alarms began to sound throughout the ship. The custodian's voice took on an urgent tone. They have felt my awakening. Even now they stir in the dark places between galaxies. We have very little time. The next few weeks were unlike anything the human crew had ever experienced. The redemption began to teach them, not through manuals or training programs, but through direct connection. When Jenny touched a weapon control, she suddenly understood how antimatter cannons worked. When Marcus examined the faster-than-light drive, the knowledge of space-time manipulation flowed into his mind. But the learning went both ways. The ancient ship, which had slept alone for millions of years, began to understand humanity through its new crew. It learned about human stubborn refusal to quit, about their ability to find humor in the darkest situations, and about their strange talent for making friends with their enemies. The other species see you as primitive, the custodian observed one day as it watched Captain Chen jury-rig a solution to a complex system failure using spare parts and determination. But they do not understand that what they call primitive, you call flexible. What they call unadvanced, you call adaptable. Dr. Vasquez made another disturbing discovery in the ship's historical records. The Silence isn't random, she announced at the daily briefing. They follow a pattern. They test each galaxy's defenses, and if they find the civilizations have grown too comfortable, too set in their ways, they sweep through and clear everything out to start fresh. Like a forest fire, Captain Chen said grimly, burning away the old growth to make room for new life. Exactly. But sometimes if a galaxy shows the right kind of resistance, if it demonstrates the ability to grow and change and adapt, they move on to easier targets. Marcus looked up from his engineering reports. So this isn't really about having the most advanced technology or the biggest fleets. It's about proving that we're still capable of becoming something more than we are. The custodian's approval was warm in their minds. Now you begin to understand. The redemption was not built to fight the Silence directly. No single ship could do that. It was built to inspire the galaxy to fight with the same desperate creativity that my builders once possessed. As the ship continued to awaken, its sensors began detecting troubling signals from the galaxy's edge. Deep space monitoring stations reported strange readings. Areas of space where stars simply stopped transmitting light, where entire systems seemed to fade from existence. How long do we have? Captain Chen asked. Based on previous patterns, perhaps 6 months before they reach the outer colonies. A year before they threaten the core worlds, the custodian replied. 6 months to prepare an entire galaxy for an enemy that had already defeated civilizations far more advanced than any that currently existed. 6 months to convince species that had spent centuries perfecting their own approaches to warfare that they needed to learn entirely new ways of thinking. But as Captain Chen looked around at her small crew, she felt something that had nothing to do with logic or careful planning. She felt hope, because if there was one thing humans excelled at, it was doing impossible things when the stakes were high enough. Well then, she said with a grim smile, I guess we'd better get started. Custodian, can this ship's communications reach every world in the galaxy? Yes, Captain. What message would you like to send? Chen thought for a moment, then spoke words that would echo through history. Tell them that humanity has awakened something that was built to protect them. Tell them that the old ways of thinking won't be enough this time, and tell them that if they want to survive what's coming, they need to learn how to fight like humans, with hope, with stubbornness, and with the absolute refusal to accept defeat. The message went out across the galaxy, and the redemption prepared for a war that would determine the fate of every living thing in their corner of the universe. The news of humanity's success with the ancient Dreadnought spread across the galaxy faster than light itself. Within days, every major world knew that the species everyone had dismissed as primitive newcomers now controlled the most powerful ship in known space. The reaction was immediate and explosive. In the Great Council chambers on Central Prime, representatives from dozens of species gathered for an emergency session. The circular hall, designed to promote equality among all voices, now buzzed with tension and barely controlled panic. This is unacceptable, declared High Commander Zethkal of the Hegemony Fleet, his crystalline body flashing angry red. A species that barely understands faster than light travel cannot be allowed to possess such power. They could destroy us all through sheer incompetence. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the assembly. The synthetics remained silent, but their mechanical forms radiated disapproval. Unit Prime 7 finally spoke, its voice perfectly modulated and emotionless. Logical analysis suggests that the humans lack the experience necessary to safely operate predecessor technology. The risk to galactic stability is significant, but not everyone agreed. Ambassador Kethvar, the Zalani scientist who had first discovered the derelict, stood to address the assembly. His normally calm demeanor showed cracks of strain, but his voice remained steady. With respect, honored colleagues, you speak of the humans as if they stole this ship through trickery. But I was there. I watched them succeed where we all failed. Perhaps the question is not whether they deserve this power, but whether we deserve to judge them for achieving what we could not. The chamber erupted in angry voices. Representatives shouted over each other, some demanding immediate action to seize the ship, others calling for economic sanctions against Earth. The chaos continued until a new voice cut through the noise. Ancient, patient, and carrying the weight of eons. You speak of things you do not understand, the custodian said, its words reaching every mind in the chamber simultaneously. The assembled representatives fell silent, some trembling at the touch of such an alien intelligence. I am the last voice of the predecessors, and I tell you this, the humans were chosen not by accident but by design. They possess something you have forgotten in your pursuit of perfection, the ability to grow beyond what you believe possible. High Commander Zethkal found his voice first. Ancient intelligence or not, you are just a machine. You have no right to decide the fate of the galaxy. The custodian's response carried a hint of amusement. I am not deciding anything, Commander. I am merely awakening in response to the approaching threat. Your galaxy has perhaps 6 months before the silence arrives. You can spend that time arguing about who deserves what, or you can spend it learning how to survive. Meanwhile, aboard the Redemption, Captain Chen found herself dealing with problems she had never imagined. Every day brought new communications from planetary governments, some demanding she surrender the ship, others begging for protection from the coming threat. 17 more requests for meetings today, reported Jenny Park, who had somehow become the ship's unofficial communications officer. The ethereal High Council wants to inspect our compliance with safety protocols. The Voidborn Collective is threatening to declare us a dimensional hazard if we don't submit to their testing. Captain Chen rubbed her temples, feeling the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. What about Earth? Any word from home? The colonial administration is Confused, Jenny said diplomatically. They're not sure if they should be proud or terrified. The president wants to talk to you personally, but she's also getting pressure from the other governments to resolve the situation peacefully. Dr. Elena Vasquez looked up from her studies of predecessor history. Sarah, I've been thinking about what the custodian said, about the humans being chosen by design. I think there might be more to our connection with this ship than we realized. What do you mean? Elena pulled up a holographic display showing genetic patterns and evolutionary timelines. I've been comparing human DNA with samples the custodian has from other species throughout galactic history. There are similarities, not direct ancestry, but shared patterns, as if certain traits have been encouraged, selected for across multiple species over millions of years. Marcus looked up from his engineering station. You're saying the predecessors somehow influenced evolution to create beings like us? Not exactly. More like they created conditions that would favor certain types of thinking, certain approaches to problems, curiosity over caution, creativity over conformity, hope over resignation. The implications were staggering. If Elena was right, then humanity's role as the ship's awakener was not coincidence, but the result of a plan that had been millions of years in the making. Their discussion was interrupted by urgent alarms. The ship's sensors had detected something at the galaxy's edge, a darkness that consumed light itself, spreading steadily inward toward the populated systems. The silence has begun its approach, the custodian announced. Long-range sensors show massive distortions in space-time, areas where the fundamental laws of physics are being rewritten. This is how they operate, not by destroying matter, but by negating the very concepts that allow life to exist. Captain Chen studied the readings with growing alarm. The approaching force was unlike anything in the military databases. It didn't follow the rules of conventional warfare because it existed partially outside the reality that those rules described. Can the galaxy's fleets stop them? She asked. Not as they currently fight, the custodian replied honestly. The silence cannot be defeated by superior firepower or advanced tactics. They must be opposed by minds that refuse to accept the limitations of what is considered possible. A new communication came in from Central Prime. The Galactic Council had reached a decision, and their message was delivered by Ambassador Kethvar, his face grave on the display screen. Captain Chen, the Council has voted. You are hereby ordered to surrender the predecessor ship to a joint command structure led by the most experienced military minds in the galaxy. Failure to comply will result in your classification as pirates and enemies of galactic peace. Captain. Chen looked around at her crew. 30 humans who had stumbled into the greatest responsibility in galactic history. They were tired, overwhelmed, and completely unprepared for the political storm surrounding them. But they were also the only beings in the galaxy who could make the redemption work. With respect, Ambassador, she replied, I don't think we can do that. This ship responds to us because of who we are, not what we know. Hand it over to your military experts, and it'll go back to being a dead hulk floating in space. Then you refuse the Council's lawful order? Chen looked at her crew one more time, seeing determination replace fear in their eyes. I refuse to let politics get in the way of saving lives. The silence is coming whether the Council likes it or not. When they get here, they won't care about our laws or our chain of command. They'll just care about erasing everything we've built. She paused, then spoke words that would be remembered long after the crisis passed. The Council can declare us pirates if they want. But when the shooting starts, they'll be glad to have pirates on their side who know how to win against impossible odds. The communication ended, leaving the humans alone with their ancient ship and the terrible knowledge that they now stood against, not just the approaching darkness, but their own galaxy's fear of change. The redemption drifted through space like a silver promise, ready to prove that sometimes the best hope for the future lay not in the hands of the wise and experienced, but in the hearts of those foolish enough to believe in miracles. The silence came like a tide of emptiness, washing over the outer rim of the galaxy and leaving nothing behind. Not destruction. Destruction would have been preferable. The silence simply erased things, removing the very concept of their existence from reality itself. Captain Chen stood on the bridge of the redemption, watching the tactical display as entire star systems winked out of existence. The ship's sensors could track the approaching void, but every other piece of technology in the galaxy was failing to even register the threat. 17 colonies have gone dark in the past week, reported Marcus from his engineering station. The Council fleets can't even find them. It's like they never existed at all. The galaxy's response had been predictably chaotic. The most advanced civilizations, confident in their superior technology, had sent their newest warships to engage the enemy. Those ships had simply vanished, their crews erased from history so completely that even their families forgot they had ever lived. The hegemony's Fourth Fleet just made contact, Jenny announced, her voice tight with strain. Or they tried to. I'm getting reports, then nothing. It's like they're being edited out of reality in real time. Dr. Elena Vasquez looked up from her analysis of the enemy's advanced patterns. The silence isn't just destroying physical matter. They're attacking the quantum foundations that allow conscious thought to exist. They're unmaking the very possibility of life. The custodian's voice filled the bridge, carrying with it the weight of ancient grief. This is how they destroyed my builders. Not through war, but through simple negation. The predecessors built me as their final answer to this threat. A ship powered not by technology alone, but by the absolute refusal to accept impossibility. Captain Chen felt the weight of every decision that had brought her to this moment. 3 months ago, she had been a simple salvage captain. Now she commanded the galaxy's only hope against an enemy that existed beyond the normal rules of reality. What's our status? She asked Marcus. All systems operational, but Sarah, we're one ship. Even with all the power the predecessors built into this thing, we can't protect an entire galaxy by ourselves. Then we don't protect the galaxy, Chen said quietly. We teach the galaxy to protect itself. She opened a communication channel that reached every surviving world, every fleeing refugee ship, every terrified commander watching their reality collapse around them. This is Captain Sarah Chen of the Earth vessel Redemption. I know most of you have written us off as pirates or fools. I know you think we're not qualified to lead in a crisis like this. You're probably right, but right now we're the only ones who have something that can fight back against what's coming. She paused, looking around at her small crew. The enemy you're facing can't be beaten with superior firepower or advanced tactics. They exist partially outside our reality, and they win by convincing you that victory is impossible. The only way to fight them is to refuse to accept that anything is truly hopeless. Reports began flooding in from across the galaxy. The Redemption's message was spreading, and with it, something that had been missing from the galactic response: hope. On the war-torn world of Kelthera, a group of Zilani scientists listened to the human captain's words and began experimenting with impossible technologies, guided more by intuition than logic. Their prototype weapons shouldn't have worked according to established physics, but they blazed with power that made the silence hesitate. In the corporate shipyards of the hegemony, engineers began modifying their warships not according to approved specifications, but based on wild ideas and desperate inspiration. Ships that should have been impossible to build began rolling off the assembly lines, powered by the kind of desperate creativity that the galaxy had forgotten it possessed. The ethereals, beings of pure energy who had always followed precise mathematical principles, began experimenting with chaotic patterns that defied their nature. Their attacks became unpredictable, impossible to counter, guided by something beyond mere calculation. But it was the humans aboard the Redemption who led by example. As the silence approached the core worlds, Captain Chen made a decision that horrified military experts throughout the galaxy. Instead of using the ship's incredible defenses to protect themselves, she ordered a direct assault on the heart of the enemy formation. The Redemption plunged into the void where the silence was strongest, where reality itself was breaking down. This is insane, Marcus shouted over the alarms as space-time twisted around them. The hull is holding, but barely. We're flying through areas where the laws of physics don't exist anymore. That's the point, Chen replied, her hands steady on the controls. The silence wins by making us believe that certain things are impossible. But we're humans. Impossible is what we do best. The ship's weapons opened fire not at physical targets, but at the conceptual foundations of the silence itself. Powered by the Redemption's reality anchor systems, each shot was a statement of defiant existence, a refusal to be erased from the universe. But the real breakthrough came when Jenny made a desperate suggestion. What if we broadcast our consciousness? Share what makes us human with every ship in the galaxy? The custodian understood immediately. Yes, the gift my builders could not give, the spark of desperate hope that refuses to be extinguished. Across the galaxy, Human voices began speaking directly to the minds of alien crews. Not giving orders or tactical advice, but sharing something more fundamental, the human conviction that every problem had a solution, that every impossible situation could be overcome through sheer stubborn determination. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Ships that had been fleeing in terror turned to fight with newfound courage. Planets that had been preparing for inevitable doom began organizing defenses that made no scientific sense but worked anyway. The galaxy discovered something it had forgotten in its pursuit of perfection: the power of believing in miracles. The final battle took place in the space between galaxies, where the silence had gathered its full strength for the killing blow. The Redemption led a fleet unlike any in galactic history, ships from dozens of species, all fighting with human-inspired determination rather than cold tactical precision. As the two forces met, reality itself became the battlefield. The Silence tried to erase their opponents from existence but found themselves facing beings who simply refused to be erased. Every time a ship was negated, its crew's absolute faith in their own existence brought them back. Every time a star was extinguished, the combined will of the defenders reignited it. Captain Chen pushed the Redemption beyond all safety limits, using the ship not as the predecessors had intended, as a fortress against the dark, but as a weapon of pure hope. The ancient vessel plunged into the heart of the Silence's formation, carrying with it the dreams and determination of an entire galaxy. In the end, the Silence didn't retreat because they were defeated. They retreated because they encountered something they had never faced before: a galaxy that had remembered how to grow, how to change, how to become more than the sum of its parts. As the darkness faded back into the void between galaxies, the Redemption drifted damaged but victorious among the wreckage of impossible battles. The galaxy had survived, but more than that, it had been transformed. The other species looked at humanity with new eyes, not as primitive newcomers, but as teachers of something they had lost. And the humans, for their part, took their place not as the galaxy's rulers but as its guardians, showing others that the universe was always full of hope for those brave enough to believe in it. Captain Chen looked around at her exhausted crew and smiled. They had done the impossible just like humans always did. And somewhere in the dark between the stars, the Silence learned a valuable lesson. Never underestimate a species that refuses to accept defeat, no matter how impossible the odds.